One of the first questions I get from all new entrepreneurs is, what is the first role that I hire for? And my favorite answer is going to be pretty obvious to you if you know what I do for a living, and that's your executive assistant. Everybody needs an EA, not a VA, by the way. VA is going to do basic grunt work. Really, an executive assistant is going to begin to act like a second you. Here's what's really interesting about your EA, is they're not going to be your EA for very long. The EA is an incubator role. My very first EA became my director of automations, my second EA became my director of social, my third EA became my CTO, and then turned into one of my best friends and my business partner. The really cool thing about the EA position is it gives you the opportunity to see what people are good at across literally every level of analysis, because you're taking all of your problems and you're dumping them on them. Now, here's what's going to happen. And this is where everybody goes wrong with their EAs. If you give an EA 10 things to do, they're going to suck at 2 of them. They're just going to be horrible. And they're going to do 6 of them passably well, to where you can keep giving them those work, and then they're going to be amazing at 2 of them. And what the entire business world does, for reasons that I still don't understand, is they go and they focus on the 2 things they suck at. And they're like, oh, don't worry, we're going to do a performance improvement program, and you're going to start taking training courses, and we're going to get you there, kiddo. Which is absurd. It makes no sense in the world. It reminds me of the Einstein quote, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it spends its whole life thinking it's stupid. Just stop giving him those 2 things. And instead, begin over-indexing in the direction of the things that they're amazing at. That's why, going back, my first EA became my director of automations, because she was amazing at automations. She was unfreaking believable. She had this amazing mind for process. Interestingly, she actually wasn't the best EA I've ever had, but she was so adept at this feature and this function. My second EA became a director of social. She wasn't an automation mind at all. As a matter of fact, she was the exact opposite. She was good at like creative and messaging, commenting, engaging. So you're not going to get the same person every time, because people aren't commodities. It doesn't matter that it's the same role, they've been trained for the same project. You're going to get massively different people, but you're going to figure out what they're good at, and then you're going to index in the direction of their skill set. Now, maybe their skill set isn't rooted in the thing that makes you the most money in your business, and that's okay too. That's where you start to spend more time with the CA and you figure out where it is that they really fit. But what's awesome about this incubation period is you get to get a sense as to everything that they're good at and everything they're not good at, and then you want to index in the direction of the things that they're good at. And ultimately, you're going to find the opportunity to ascend them in your organization. That's what's really cool, is all of my executive assistants have ascended into something infinitely more important than the executive assistant role. And that's what you want. The other thing that you've noticed, and I've seen this with my friends, one of my friends, Calvin Corelli, who's the founder and CEO of Simplero, his executive assistant became his chief of staff. And what's interesting about that is the chief of staff role is, again, effectively your clone, your replacement. I've heard business owners and entrepreneurs say over and over and again, oh, if I could just clone myself. I wish I could clone myself. I wish I could copy myself. You can, and you can do that using your executive assistant. Now, sometimes it requires more than one. I have 2 at the moment. I have 2 executive assistants, one who helps me with my, what would you call it, the day-to-day managerial work, inbox management, communication, calendar management, etc. And then I have another gentleman, Julian, who helps me with my special projects. And the reason I have 2 is because there's stuff that Josefina, my primary EA, just isn't great at. And I love her to death. She's phenomenal. She's one of the best I've ever had. But why would I continue to send her work that is, even if she's able to execute on it, is like, let's say, costly? It takes her more time than it would take somebody else. The economic reality of the EA is a really important one to consider. A good EA is probably going to cost you around $20 an hour. Here's the thing to think about, is you don't want to analyze the cost efficiency of an EA based off of that number. What you don't want to do is start saying, well, gosh, if I send them this project or this task or unload this thing, is that worth $20 an hour to me? What you want to do is you want to compare what it would cost you to do it if you had to do it yourself, right? So it's not whether or not the task is worth the time, it's whether or not your time is worth the trade. I bill at $1,500 an hour. So any hour of my time is worth immensely more than the $20 I'm going to give my EA. Anything I spend my time doing needs to be booked at that benchmark. And by the way, that should be true for you too. You might say like, oh, well, I'm early stage, I don't bill that much. Your time is worth that much because the entrepreneurial equity is always to be valued at a multiple. And that's practically true, by the way, because all businesses trade at a multiple. I sold my business, I sold a marketing agency for 6 to 8x EBITDA is what marketing agencies sell for. I'm not allowed to say the exact number because I'm under NDA. But what does that mean? That means that every dollar of profit an agency earns, and I was a very small agency, by the way. Agencies that reach 5 million EBITDA trade at 10 to 13x. So in my scenario, every dollar that my agency earned was worth 6 to 8 times which is an unbelievable lever. So even though you're not necessarily billing at, extremely high rates, you should still look at the value of your time through that lens. So let's say that you're billing at $100 an hour, which should be a minimum, right, for professional services. If you're billing at $100 an hour and you're going to sell your business for 6 to 8 times, that means your time is worth $600 to $800. And that doesn't even include how leverageable that time is in terms of the type of business that you build. But the point that I'm trying to make isn't subtle. If it takes you a half hour to do something and you delegate it to your EA and it takes the EA 4 hours to do that same task because they're just not as good as you, that's still a better trade because you just spent $80 doing this thing instead of the $800 that your time is worth. Reframe the way you think about your time. And what's interesting is once you have an EA, one of the things that I want you to start to do is don't replace the time that you're buying back with more tasks. Put nothing on your calendar. You need margin. You need blank space. You need time to walk, to think, to breathe. The less you do, I promise you this is true, the more money you'll make. I saw Leila Hormozi put this brilliant reel online the other day. She said that none of her billionaire friends, and apparently she has quite a few of them, have anything on their calendar, which makes all the sense in the world. And you think to yourself, well, I'm not a billionaire. And that's the question, is chicken and egg. Are they billionaires because they have nothing on their calendar, or they have nothing on their calendar because they're billionaires? And I imagine as you get closer to that, those two things end up being, they're not mutually exclusive. But the more excess time you can buy yourself, the more you're going to be able to work on your business and not in your business. And the more you're going to be able to do things that are truly valuable. If it can be process sized, if it's a task, if it can be on a to-do list, odds are you can delegate it. You should be able to delegate everything in your business. I'll say that again because it's really important. You should be able to delegate everything in your business. Every task, anything that would show up on your calendar or your to-do list should at some point be something that can be offered to another human being. And if it's not, if there's nobody in your business to delegate that to, you now know what your next hire is. So as your business grows, anything that you find yourself doing, those are the things that you want to hire away. And those are the businesses, by the way, they're going to grow by leaps and bounds. So focus on the skill set of delegation, and the best place to learn that skill, to cultivate talent, to find people that can be promoted and ascended is an executive assistant. Hire your first executive assistant, and then the thing that I'd ask you to do is just be honest with him. If this is your first at bat, tell him, look, I've never delegated to somebody before. I'm not going to be very good at it. I'm going to ask you to bear with me. But it's the most important role that you can possibly have for all the reasons that I just discussed. If you're not ready yet, that's probably a sign that you have to do it, because you're never going to be ready. It's already too late. You're already doing a bunch of garbage tasks that you shouldn't be doing, which I'll talk about in other videos. But if you're interested in what's the next role that I hire for and you don't have an EA, go hire yourself an EA right now today.